very much for joining us this morning at today's webinar. My name is Stuart Bell. I'm Sales and Marketing Director at Group BC, and I'm joined today by one of my colleagues, Chris Mills, who between us over the next hour will be defining an information management challenge that the industry has been faced with and continues to have issue with in terms of broad collaboration and adoption. Chris will be really focusing in on what the solutions might be to the information management conundrum that we're facing, and I'll follow on in the wrap-up section at the end in terms of what positive actions that we can take. So in terms of the key takeaways, I'll give you a brief introduction to Group BC, talk about the project information problems that we are looking to solve, and then Chris will really focus in on a piece of technology that's been labelled or branded a common data environment. And in fact, it's not just a single technology; it can be a combination of technologies that come together to provide a collaborative platform and a single place for people to work in a trusted, reliable, and secure way. And one way we thought to articulate that is pick on a couple of client case studies. So we'll be introducing you to Mackley. So they're a regional contracting organisation, part of the Van Oord Group. They do a lot of marine engineering, and Balfour Beatty really need no introduction, but they've been clients for almost 20 years now, working across their both regional and strategic project work across many sectors. And then we'll wrap up with where and how do you start your CD journey. So for the last 20 years, Group BC have been creating a platform, a technology that helps organisations be more joined up in the way that they manage information, notably project and asset information. And we call this a common data environment, or a CDE for short. And that's all about communicating out your information need, capturing the requirements. So that may be from a main contractor or your supply chain, or if you're a client organisation, from your tier one. Computing, so looking at how you might want to review, approve, and check information, and then connecting that information onward to downstream systems. So we're seeing increasingly a desire for organisations to connect data through a workflow from CapEx to OpEx, and maybe onward into operational systems and facilities management systems as well. So in summary, largely the industry has been one that's quite disaggregated, very hierarchical, lots of individual companies carrying their own systems, and then in an individual organisation, lots of disaggregated systems used typically at a departmental level. And one of the things that we're looking to do, if you view that line in the centre of the screen there as the door to your business, is to try and give you a single trusted and uniform access, one portal, one environment through which you can access all of the latest as-built information, for instance, and see its status, who it's been issued to, has it been approved, etc. And so again, it's about communicating and capturing in that environment. BC, we work across a variety of sectors, and I think that breadth of sector reach, both in buildings and civil infrastructure, into retail, energy and utilities, has put an awful lot of demand from clients in that space around how they want to work. So if it's utilities or defence, there's a heavy focus on compliance and the aspects of information assurance and information security. Where in retail, it's all about quantum and how can we drive through our projects as quickly as possible in order that they're feeding into our business model. And we've got an esteemed set of clients. So many of these clients actually rebadge, rename the system, and we'll come on to that when we certainly when we talk about Balfour Beatty later. But what you'll see here is that many of the organisations, and probably about 50% of our clients, are work givers to the industry, be they in the public sector or in the private sector. Utilities as and aviation as kind of quasi-government or almost organisations, culturally, and how they like to work, all the way through to organisations like Sainsbury's, who are probably one of the best exemplar clients that we have in terms of full digital estate management, digital estate adoption, and how they've driven that right down through their design team, supply chains, in order that colleagues can get access to answer plain language questions through their environment when and where needed. So I'll just focus a little bit on the paradox that that faces, and I'll present a series of contrasts. So as project professionals, on average, we're probably using in the region of 6 to 7 business applications a day to do our job, and quite quickly we've all become solutioneers and just demand performance. So even this move from on-premise and local desktop installed applications to cloud-based performance. It's interesting if you're sitting next to somebody in the office who's streaming a CPD video on YouTube, what that might mean to your local performance of the web applications that you're driving out. So we've all got an opinion on that. And technology has brought about and increased the speed of working in industry generally, and notably in construction as well. And if you think about historically how we might have transacted between organizations around a design review approval process, historically in the world of hard copy and a manual issue sheet that would have been couriered or posted between parties, on receipt of that information, we'd have the time over a cup of coffee to sit down and actually review some of the design challenges in front of us. But now there's an immediacy to action as soon as an email lands in our inbox, and it sets a precedent. It's your personal DNA in terms of the timeliness of your response. If you respond really quickly to your clients, they'll always expect that. And so there's this challenge here of technology. Fantastic, makes us more effective, efficient, speeding up our working lives. But are we ensuring that there's a healthy balance? And several years ago, we all got or started to get iPhones and iPads for Christmas, and actually that was a key and pivotal change at a board of director level, because this technology is very, very accessible. And I've certainly seen on my travels nationally where IT managers have come under pressure to deliver very intuitive software. Give me one big button to press that gives me the answer, gives me the latest reported information on the status of my projects. But we also thrive on complexity in terms of the range of applications that we use, and we've all become, or certainly many of us have become, key stakeholders and in certain applications, and recognise that we're a power user and we're a systems administrator, and it's given us this amazing level of control that we've got all of this in-depth knowledge that we can drive, navigate, and configure application software to drive better outcomes on our projects. But equally, are we a constraint? The fact that colleagues may have to come to us because we are the expert user, that's something to ponder. And such is the rate of pace of change of technology that a lot of systems and a lot of businesses have been caught short. Certainly those that have implemented on-premise server strategies just simply can't keep up with the pace of change of processing power and the levels and size of data packets that we're now exchanging between organizations, be they model files or bundles of issued drawings. And so we've got this natural frustration of these outdated back office systems, and in many instances front office systems as well. So even between a design and construction team working on different versions of the same proprietary software. And to illustrate the example, I'll pick on Autodesk, for instance, and the inability of certain applications to be backward compatible once you've opened and accessed files in a later release of software. So it's very important that we're open around our information strategy as a collaboration team about what tools we're going to be using to ensure compatibility. But the contrast with these outdated back office systems, actually we've now got these new handheld devices, and wherever we are working, we've got this insatiable desire to want to log on and to connect to the business, to connect to our projects, to ensure we can see the latest information. Hopefully not on a beach whilst we're holidaying with our families, but certainly on the move. And you only have to walk around London as people pop up out of the underground to see people diving to their mobile devices for the the latest updates. And we're becoming a data first industry, and I've put a rhetorical question, aren't we? Certainly in my experience, probably not. There is a polarization. There's pockets of brilliance and adoption where either clients and their vertical supply chain actually recognize that client organizations, as well as procuring a physical asset, are procuring a digital asset as well. And if they're in the private sector, it may not be working to open BIM standards or COBE as the information exchange type. It may be a very prescriptive format that they need to feed their downstream systems, like their facilities management solution. And the reality on my travels up and down the nation, perhaps not quite as bad, but we're still an industry that has a heavy reliance and drowning in paper. And paper is still, in many senses, a reliable and trusted source. Just yesterday, I was chatting to a client who has implemented the BC technology in order to disseminate health and safety information across a broad estate, and to colleagues who are working across an estate of some 4,500 assets. But the reality is their digital data set isn't complete. And the trusted source in many of those buildings and those facilities is still paper. But paper is very costly. It's very binary, and it's very expensive to transact around. It's very expensive to archive as well. And equally, we see and we have this idea that we like to work and traverse between perhaps our desktop PC and a works laptop, and all of a sudden things like USB drives have made information very portable, and information en masse at the end of the project. I want to transfer that information over. It's very, very easy to move data in and out of our organizations, and if you don't have the appropriate controls in place, you could be culpable in opening yourself up to attack. And certainly if you're in the construction supply chain, working into MOJ, MOD, into Highways England, even into some of the major aviation clients now, critical national infrastructure and the management of information around that is becoming of the utmost importance. So it's really key that as organizations that you understand both operationally as people on projects, as well as your board of directors, about the levels of risk they're opening themselves up to. And a lot of what we see in terms of the mismanagement of information is this demand, or this desire for each of us individually to create our own unique filing structures. Now, I exaggerate a point in showing this image, but all of you, I'm sure, will be aware of the infamous P drive, which actually in your Manchester office is the J drive, and trying to link between those drives and find information can be very, very challenging. And we're an organization, an industry, sorry, that recognises that perhaps there's got to be a better way. We're building a multi-million pound asset with lots of moving and component parts. Perhaps we need to think about numbering and naming conventions, and the old PAS 1192 suite's now being superseded by the 19650 suite. Gives us clear guidance on how we label and name information, how we apply metadata to document data and spatial information that we're looking to share in order to support the way that we work. But the industry productivity tools that we're still reliant on tend to be things like Excel. Certainly, if you've got a large corporate ERP or back office finance system and you're charged with running the finance of a particular job, perhaps Excel is the better intermediary for you to do that. But all of a sudden, you've broken the holy grail of information management in that you've detached the data set that's within your control. It's not current. It's going to suffer with the challenge of latency. It's going to potentially suffer with the challenges of manual rekeying as well. And then all hail email and Dropbox as well. And I think if we removed Excel, email, and Dropbox from our industry, it'd be very challenging for us to operate. But increasingly, we're met with regulation and compliance demands. So whether that's quality demands, information security demands, particular information naming standards of your clients and the way they expect to procure and receive information from you, puts an onus of responsibility of you then to educate and to distill down your requirements to your supply chain and ensure that information is verified and validated as well on receipt. And historically, we've been an industry that is open to claim, and this whilst this is an older quote, and it's a little bit tongue in cheek here. Thames House refurbishment was fraught with difficulty. It's clear that dealing with the building industry was just as tricky as dealing with the KGB, and that's something that we ought to all reflect on, especially when the levels and velocity of construction claim in the UK is outpacing that in the US. And then naming standards again, it's clear that we have to be crystal clear in our articulation of information requirements, because you get what you ask for in life, and certainly at a project level, I can imagine in the not too distant future that that organisations will be paid on performance, not just on the delivery of phases of a built asset, but also on the data as well. And it's no longer acceptable for the O&M process, for instance, to be a defined work package that we've forgotten about and we pull together at the end of a project, and we put the thumb screws on our supply chain to try and retrofit and collect information. So we've got these key drivers for change, and the decision and direction of the industry digital transformation and that of your own organisations really is yours as well. And one thing in my mind that's hampered that really is a lack of education, a lack of understanding of what the strategic benefits are and what the business case for adoption ought to be. And right at the core of that are people. Ensuring that we answer the question, what's in it for me, for the individual, as well as being able to articulate to the stakeholders and shareholders of our business how they're going to benefit from, in this scenario, technological adoption as well. So we've got these pull and push requirements. And just before I hand over, just last year the UK government released their AIM CDE functional requirements, and this is moving at a pace, and I've certainly seen this document or subsets of this document picked up by the private sector as well, because it really sets about a framework for clients, major asset owners, to actually understand the value of information, understand the value of data, and what the long-term retention and reuse of that data linked to their built asset might be. This idea of defining a digital asset at handover and then hooked into building services or building systems, IoT sensors and the like, where you're getting live feedback into your business. If you don't have a framework, if you don't have a structure, if you don't have clear naming conventions to ingest project information from the construction supply chain and then map that onto your asset structure, that will be very challenging. And equally, we're a business that has got a strong pedigree in recruiting graduates into industry, be it into commercial consulting or development roles. And I'm just posing a question here about how much of a handbrake must it be for young people who have been on potentially degree courses. The University of Salford got this condensed 2-year degree course, probably exposed to a significant amount of technology through the course of that degree. And yet they're coming into an industry that has been slow to adopt and maybe challenged with using paper process, network shares, email, Dropbox and the like. It must be very challenging to retain that level of enthusiasm to want to get on and do the job. So I'll end there. I've provided a little bit of background and context, and I'll pass over now to my colleague Chris, who will give you some insights to how we can address some of the challenges that we've raised there.
Thank you, Stuart, and good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to spend the next 20 minutes or 25 minutes just giving you a little bit of insight in terms of not only some of our client case studies, so we're talking about Mackley, but also giving you a bit of context and a few practical examples around how you can start to utilize this sort of software to introduce a bit more organisation and a bit more structure into the way that you're working on a daily basis onto projects. And we're quite fortunate. We speak to lots of businesses, across the industry who this sort of image that we see on the screen here will probably look quite familiar. So again, sort of utilising emails and attachments, Dropbox, FTP sites, yellow folders, and when you're delivering a project from A to Z, getting that across it all in one piece is a complete nightmare if you're working in that type of environment. So what we're ultimately looking to achieve when we introduce a system like BC is that clarity around what is the latest version, is the drawing that I'm looking at, has it been approved for construction? So these are kind of the basic bread and butter things that we look to try and answer in terms of the exam question, but equally there's a lot of value that we can add over and above that type of scenario. So I'm just going to dip into a bit of live software, and we'll take a look at sort of a number of sort of different things around general information management processes, but also how we can look to adopt some of the BIM standards which are available across the industry. When you're logging in for the first time on a Monday morning into any new system, that there are always going to be kind of pockets of resistance across the projects and even internally within your business in terms of kind of doubters and people saying, oh, why do we need to change? We've always done it this way, and we've kind of survived so far. But ultimately, in order to get those kind of people bought into the system, then having a really kind of simple, intuitive system is absolutely one of the key things which you need to factor into that kind of process. So just kind of going through what we're seeing on the screen here. So search capability is one of sort of the key foundations of any of these types of systems. Around 80% of activity within these types of systems are people logging in and wanting to search and retrieve information. And again, it's all about surfacing that key information to users literally as soon as they log in for the first time. So advanced search capabilities, access to your dashboard. So what have I got to do today, this week, this month? What things are overdue, for example, access to your recent projects and access to kind of signposted different areas of the system as well. So you can probably get a bit of a sense in terms of what that kind of homepage looks like, and it's a really key point to getting those sort of naysayers and doubters brought into the system on day one and as early part of that adoption process. So once we've dived into a particular project, so again, this is a fairly kind of generic example that we got on the screen here, but fundamentally this is about sort of presenting again sort of project related information to the user right as soon as they get into this particular project. So again, I've got some project dashboard capability. I've got some information about what the project is. I've got quick and easy access to recent documents that I might be working on, and some project media as well. So at the moment, I'm logged in as a supply user. So we'll take a bit of a look at a bit of a day in the life of an architect, for example, and then we'll kind of switch hats and take a bit of a look at in terms of a day in the life of a contractor, for example, just to give you a few kind of practical examples in terms of what that kind of workflow looks like up and down through the supply chain, and as we move through sort of the life cycle of the project. So for those of you online that are familiar with the BIM standards and sort of the ISO 19650 standards as well, so you'll probably start to recognise the sort of core quadrants in terms of the common data environment, so WIP to shared, publish and archive. And again, these are the sorts of things which we're delivering kind of week in, week out from our perspective. So we've effectively kind of packaged that up as a templated offering. So again, getting projects mobilised and getting them up and running from day one is a pretty quick process, so we can move quite quickly, and again, sort of depending on resources on sort of project teams at our side, we can move these things to get you mobilised very quickly from that side of things. So I won't go into too much detail in terms of sort of the sort of structure that we're looking at here, but if I just very quickly dive into our project information collection here. Effectively, this is a big bucket of information relating to the projects, and again, if I scoot along to the right hand side, you can see it's all been correctly tagged and aligned to sort of the industry standards. So again, from an information management perspective, we're driving consistency, we're driving structure, we're driving compliance to the standards, and again, it's all about when it comes to things like handover, for example, we've got a nice neatly packaged set of documents, drawings, model files, etc., and it's that handover process is made a whole lot easier. So one of the key sort of challenges that we see across the industry is file naming conventions. And again, anyone who's kind of starting their journey out on a BIM project, for example, BIM level 1 is all about sort of structuring your information in line with the standards, and no longer can we call a drawing Chris's drawing and then upload it onto sort of collaborative space and hope people know what that drawing is relating to. We've got to start adopting some more disciplined ways of working. But again, from BC and from a technology vendor's perspective, the onus is on us to make that process and that step change as easy as humanly possible. So we've introduced things like placeholders, for example. So again, we speak to lots of kind of project teams who are struggling with sort of different disciplines using different file name conventions. So when it comes into the common data environment, it should all be aligned to a single file naming convention. So if I was an architect, for example, and I want to share a couple of drawing files, and then I can effectively kind of reserve some drawing placeholders on the system ready to be populated into the project. So let's just say these are second floor plans, for example. And very quickly, just through filling in what is effectively a quick online form, I can then reserve 2 placeholders which are automatically aligned to the particular file name convention. And the good thing about this is the fact that as an architect, I might have my own naming and numbering system locally, but when it comes onto the CDE, BC will effectively retain that project-related file name convention. So again, it's all about driving consistency across how information is uploaded and shared on the system as well. So you can see I've got a couple of placeholders reserved on the system. So these are effectively kind of empty shells waiting for documents to be fulfilled into. So again, if I wanted to fulfill that very easily, I can fulfill that individually. Alternatively, I can do that en masse through our drag and drop capability. So if I select these 4 drawings here, just very quickly drag them off my laptop, drop them onto BC, and BC will recognise that again we've got 4 placeholders waiting for those drawings to go into. So all of a sudden, BC is starting to recognise that because it's a .dwg, it must be a 2D drawing. So again, from the architect's perspective, all of the hard work in terms of that upload and processing and publishing side of things is a lot of the manual effort is taken away from me just because we're using those placeholders and we're using the file name conventions to help kind of drive that discipline. So I can put these onto the system pretty quickly, and I can use this drop-down capability to do that en masse. If I save that, those 4 drawing files have all of a sudden gone into a shared environment. They're aligned to the file name conventions, and again, generally speaking, when we get to this process, we're then looking to kind of put them onto a workflow, for example. So again, it's a very simple case of selecting one or many from the listing. I can come into the workflow button and put that onto a shared workflow. Now, again, those of you familiar with the sort of the BIM standards will kind of recognise this check, review, and approval transmittal process. So again, this is all about taking the documents and the files and the drawings through their natural life cycle of WIP to share to publish and into archive. So we can do some clever things around automating sort of the workflows and who it needs to go to, and effectively kind of grouping up distribution. So it might be design review teams, for example. We can set them up as a distribution group. We can send it to other people for information. So very simple in terms of sort of defining who we need it to go to and for what reasons. Just going to confirm the suitability. I'm going to say, please check, review, and approve. Hit the send button. So anyone who's kind of familiar with filling in online forms, or anyone who's familiar with sending emails, you would hope that is not a huge step change for them in terms of that process. So from a workflow perspective, dead simple, and again, sort of keeping that in mind as we go through sort of the system is one of sort of the key things that we look to try to achieve. So that's our architect. We've uploaded some drawings. We've aligned it to the file name conventions. We put it onto a workflow. It's gone to the contractor for approval. So I'm just going to log out as the architect. I'm going to log back in as the contractor, and I can then start to kind of utilise my task dashboards to kind of tick off a number of things which I might need to do. So I could action the one which we've just sent. or I can see I've got a number of things which have got certain due dates that I need to action. So if I have a look at this one, we can start to do some clever things around the version control piece as well. So we see again lots of challenges across the industry where you might have issued version 1 of a drawing to a contractor. It then gets revised, and then the contractor's not quite sure which version they're looking at. So again, one of the sort of key things that we do within BC is make that incredibly clear to the end user in terms of what version they're expecting or expected to approve. So I come into my issue sheet, and again, I've got some options here. If I hit the little drop down here, you can see that I've got the ability to, before I mark up and comment on this drawing, I can compare what's changed from version 1 to version 2. So this then opens up our integrated 2D viewer markup tool. So by default, it kind of lays the version 1 and version 2 side by side. So my eye is not trained quite well enough to spot the differences there, but again, I've got a little button which says show the differences. So we're effectively kind of overlaying the differences between version 1 and version 2, and I can even change the background to make that a little bit clearer as well. So I can very quickly see there's been a couple of changes. I can see that the staircase has moved, and we've made some changes to the kitchen island in that particular drawing as well. So really simple capability, but again, it's starting to iron out those issues which we see on a day-to-day basis, where people are struggling to understand what version am I meant to approve. And again, it's a subtle thing, but one which needs careful consideration. I can then sort of go through and mark that up. So again, if putting my contractor hat on, I've got the ability to provide some comments on top of that particular drawing. And again, we could spend sort of half an hour having a look at sort of the various kind of features and functions in here, but again, just giving you a bit of an idea in terms of the sort of general capability. You can start to get a bit of an idea in terms of what you might want to do here. And again, if we kind of reflect back in terms of where we were maybe sort of 5, 10, 15 years ago, the sort of the old process would be kind of getting a drawing in through the post, for example, or through a fax machine, printing that out, scribbling on top of it, and then sending it back on its merry way. And again, that kind of end-to-end process might take sort of a few days, might take weeks, might take months, sort of depending on sort of the back and forth that we might be exchanging. So all of a sudden, we're taking that kind of process, digitizing it, and putting it into sort of a cloud-based environment where, again, regardless of whether you're sat in the office or out on site on your iPad, you can do this kind of capability in terms of that kind of typical review, commenting and marking up process as well. So I'm just going to close that down, and then we'll come back into sort of the projects side of things. So one of the key things when you start to get a project up and running is and these workflows going through sort of the life cycle is you want to be able to keep track of sort of the information, whether it's transmittal information, whether it's document related information. So again, we've got a series of registers down at the bottom here, and these are effectively kind of on-demand reports, which are going to help me when I go into my kind of weekly or monthly project update and review meeting. Where are we from an information perspective on certain areas? And I've got a number of document registers, I've got RFI registers, workflow transmittal type registers. So again, it's about sort of taking those kind of key things that we know based on our 20 years of experience that people are going to want to understand during these types of review meetings, and making it available to you through 1 or 2 clicks. So if I just wanted to see all documents uploaded to this project by my company, again, what BC is doing, we're effectively kind of cutting and slicing through that big container or collection of documents and drawings and model files, and we're presenting the user with sort of key information that they might be looking for. Okay, so what we've looked at there is quite a formal process. It's very much kind of aligned to the BIM standards, and again, we speak to lots of companies in the industry who are very much at the start of that journey. But equally, there's lots of companies who are doing kind of smaller works and might not be ready to kind of go into that kind of full BIM environment. So that being sort of the case, then again, BC's got that flexibility to be inclusive enough to support some less formal ways of working as well. And again, before sort of coming on to our kind of Mackley case study, one of the key things for them was adopting better disciplines and better collaboration across internal departments. And again, it's something which we see across the whole industry, whether it's contractor, an architect, consultant, or even the client organisation themselves. So lots of people are quite familiar with using things like Dropbox, for example. And again, sort of the familiarity aspect of that is something which people will tend to revert to because they're familiar with it. It's simple, it's easy to use. But again, we're taking that kind of simplicity aspect and making it available in BC as well. So the example that we're looking at on the screen here is just sort of we're in a folder full of different photos. These might be site photos that we've taken across the project. If I wanted to kind of share this with either a colleague or an extended part of my supply chain, for example, one of the key things, or one of sort of well-used things, is if I can very quickly click on that particular link. So what is a photo? This might be minutes of the meeting, it might be a drawing file, it might be a model file, but in a fairly informal fashion, I can share this, as I say, kind of internally or externally. So I've got a secure link and a public link down at the bottom here, little envelope icon next to that. So again, if I just click on that icon, very simply fires up an email, and I can share that with a colleague. So the secure link will prompt them to, when they click on it, to log into BC with their username and password. Alternatively, if I was to send a public link, then we can send that to a non-registered user of the system. Again, just a very kind of simple way of collaborating and keeping a single source of truth on the CDE. So at that point, I'm going to dip back into PowerPoint mode, and we'll just have a bit of a look at sort of the Mackley case study. So again, it's an important thing to recognise just in terms of the journey that Mackley have been on. So we started engaging with Mackley back in 2015, and again, it's a really kind of key example that we're looking to replicate, and it's the fact that they kind of recognise both internal and external drivers from an information management perspective to want to improve not only their internal disciplines around sort of delivering projects, but also getting pressures from clients such as the Environment Agency and kind of local authorities that they're working with to adopt BIM standards, for example. So if we just quickly reflect on who Mackley are. So as Stuart alluded to, they're relatively kind of small to medium-sized contractor based down on the south coast. Sort of do a lot of flood defence works and piling contracting type coastal maintenance type work as well. And again, they were bought out by Van Oors, who are £1.5 billion dredging contractor based over in the Netherlands. And again, they took advantage of the investment that came as part of that takeover, and again started to invest in sort of technologies and processes and people underpinning their projects. So one of the key drivers for Mackley was the fact that it was kind of threefold really. So they wanted to not only adopt BIM level 2 compliance across their projects, but they also needed to adopt a single point or single source of truth for all of their projects and departmental information as well. The other kind of key points was business continuity. So again, they're starting to see their internal on-premise servers starting to creak at the seams with email traffic becoming a bit of a problem both internally and externally. So again, they were kind of recognised that the move to the cloud was something which was going to help release some of that pressure on their internal IT systems. So in terms of what the problem was that they're looking to try and solve, and it's interesting to kind of reflect on sort of the journey that they've been on, and it was all about getting both individuals and multidisciplinary teams to adopt sort of the CDE. And again, it's that kind of that cultural piece when you're embarking on these sorts of implementations is that there are going to be some vocal people who don't want to change, but it's about just sort of finding the sort of one or two key things which are going to make their lives and their day job a little bit easier, which are going to help them to turn those kind of naysayers around. But as it says down at the bottom, people don't like asking for help, and it's kind of human nature. And again, typically people will revert to whatever's easiest for them. So rather than using the latest template, which is on the CD, they might use the latest template, which is on their local drive. But the 9 times out of 10, that's going to be out of date, and it's going to start breaching kind of policies and procedures and ISO standards when we get audited from that side of things as well. But equally, Mackley are very progressive in terms of sort of technology and levels of ambition that they wanted to take this kind of CD journey on. And they're doing some really interesting work around starting to combine GIS data with their projects and BIM data as well. So what we're seeing on the screen here is one of our kind of embedded modules called GeoLink. So this sort of gives them the ability to populate on a map points of interest, but it's also pointing and connecting relevant information, so links to the latest site drawings or the latest kind of borehole reports. So again, from an end user perspective, one of the key challenges that they had was getting their site teams engaged with using the system. And I think if most people online, if we look at our mobile phones, most of us will have some sort of mapping app on them. So again, people are familiar with that, using that on a day-to-day basis. So we kind of thought, from the user's perspective, let's put that information and connect that information through an intuitive 2D map interface. But equally, we're starting to pull through some external data sets. So you can see over on the left-hand side, we've got access to things like environment agent flood data, SSI data, local authority boundary data. So again, we're starting to converge and merge all of this relevant information and data into a single kind of mapping interface. So when it comes to things like optioneering for projects, we've got that key information available to us in 1 or 2 clicks. So underpinning that and kind of sitting in the background is their kind of file-based storage as well. So again, they've given us a lot of good feedback in terms of the placeholder functionality, because again, it's all about driving that consistency around what information is getting uploaded onto the CDE. And again, we can start to search and cut and slice through the information to connect to the relevant people. And the information accessibility side of things is a really kind of key thing as well. So regardless of whether it kind of sat in the office or out on sites, again, I might be out down on the south coast on this kind of shoring project. I can open up my phone, I can navigate into BC, toggle my way through a map, click on some icons, and it's then presenting me with relevant information pertaining to that particular area of the project as well. So from an end user perspective, it's all about sort of driving that information to them in the simplest possible way that we can do. So again, we actually held a webinar with them last year called The Power of Location. So that's available on the website. So I'd urge anyone who's interested in that GIS side of things and the mapping side of things to have a bit of a look at that case study on the website. So at that point, I'll pass back over to Stuart.
Thank you, Chris. So just to contrast Mackley as a regional contractor, we thought we'd just focus on and show you how the adoption of a CDE at scale what that looks like at Balfour Beatty. So again, this is a presentation that Balfour Beatty put together at a user conference that we held, really as part of a knowledge share exercise to showcase to other organisations how they're looking at not only the core CDE technology, but how they're also looking at integrations with other key business systems, and importantly, things like business intelligence reporting tools as well. So without showcasing the stats on Balfour Beatty, I've just highlighted some key stats around their usage of BC. So we've been working with Balfour Beatty since January 2001. They call the system KOL, Knowledge Online. So any of you that have interacted or sit in the supply chain or delivered design information, perhaps into Balfour Beatty, you may not have heard of Group BC, Business Collaborator, but you may well have heard of KOL. And you can see there's over 12 million documents, 28 terabytes of storage, and that's growing at quite a rate, and notably because where Balfour Beatty aren't in a position to provision a CDE environment for a joint venture, and that's perhaps bestowed upon another party, at the end of contract, they're taking all of that archive information from the other JV party and they're uploading that into BC. So there's one trusted central archive of all of that project information. So there's just shy of 8,000 projects and 60,000 registered users, probably sitting around the 14,000 a month in terms of active users that will be engaged with the system, clearly across a variety of different organisations up and down the construction supply chain, from client organisations through to trade contractors as well. Just to give you some feel for the levels of usage and interaction and the performance that a cloud-hosted environment can deliver. The system's being designed for scale, so it's exactly the same code base that we've deployed to Mackley as we have to Balfour Beatty. And one of the benefits of cloud computing in that regard is that you do get that processing CPU flex, and also the infinite or expanding storage as well. So 14 new documents every minute, 111 gig every week. 96 new projects added per quarter, and again, that's all shapes and sizes of work that they're on. I think it equates in the region of £8.5 billion worth of active project work are being run through the BC platform. Chris has focused on a number of areas right in the heart of the CDE around the document data, spatial information control, and he also showed what looked like an email workflow. And in fact, that environment there does support this idea of electronic data capture. And what Balfour Beatty have done with that is to extend out the standard workflows that we deliver, and it's within the gift of any of our trained clients to do this, and to create their own contract communications, contract management workflows. So in this instance, a non-conformance database, all of that data collation, or an amount of that data collation happening in BC, and then we're sharing that information out to Microsoft SQL Server and Microsoft Power BI for Balfour Beatty then to produce their own specific dashboards from. Similarly, and just a slight left turn on that, very practically, as they're delivering out to projects, it's important for them to track and maintain a material test database, and so they've got the full provenance of that database all held within the BC or KOL environment. And they've opened up access onto iPads and other tablet usage. So we Highways England are a major client of ours, and we support them across all of their major programs. Equally, we have quite a number of members of the construction supply chain delivering into Highways England. So Smart Motorways program was the initial program that we started with HE, and you can see here that Balfour Beatty and the HTML5 and responsive nature of the application means that the screen content scales down to specifically to the information that the Balfour Beatty operatives need to access, and this idea of the big button press here is certainly in their design thoughts. As are presenting information on a map and being able to drill in and actually look for defects, outstanding works in those specific hotspots, and they can visualize there which are open, which are complete, which are closed, all color coded there. Highly visual. The map is a fantastic metaphor for accessing information, and something probably in our private lives we're very comfortable to work with. And when you open up BC on a phone or on a tablet, you can then leverage some of the capabilities of that phone or tablet. So in this instance, taking photographs and linking that into an electronic forms flow. But importantly for them, it is a lot of the reason that we implement technology, aside from compliance, is actually to drive benefit, is to gather and pull out insights from the information on our active projects. So again, this dashboard here is all about their request for information, and on a major project such as the A14 here, Balfour Beatty are able to profile the status of all of those RFIs, drill into the content, look at who's overdue, is there a pattern of certain supply chain parties in terms of the timeliness of response. And that's highly visual, and it's something that they open up almost as a league table performance to their supply chain partners that are working with them. So hopefully in that, not only have we showed you an environment, but we've then laid out both in Mackley and Balfour Beatty that this is highly flexible and scalable technology that can be used almost as a simple Dropbox solution if you are just dipping your toe in the water of project information management control, all the way through to a highly scaled up CDE supporting standards with wide collaboration, opening up for your tier 1, tier 2 and further, to ensure that everybody is fully engaged and you've got a complete audit trail of all of the information and interactions that are taking place on your project. Just in the last couple of minutes of wrap up, I mentioned one of the pull factors as being the government AIM CDE standard, and this idea now that major clients and asset owners are looking to actually understand what's in their estate, either practically so that they can manage that estate better, or from an audit and regulation perspective. In the instance of, for instance, Grenfell, there is a complete archive of all of the information that's been received and catalogued, and something that then acts as a repository to update. And so I think increasingly you'll see over the forthcoming years a big drive from not only public sector but private sector clients who will be implementing their own CDE technologies for projects as well as asset information management, and they'll be clients will become a lot more articulate with what they expect you then to deliver. And this idea of defining information delivery plans and tracking fulfillment of deliverables into the CDE is currently something that's coming out in our next major release in the summer, and something that interestingly has been driven by one of our asset owning clients. Just very briefly, we wanted to make sure in marketing and positioning our CDE technology that it actually maps onto the maturity of an organisation, so that if they wanted to implement just on a Pathfinder project to meet the specific needs of that project, there's a license edition and type that closely maps onto the industry standards, and you can either use that for single or multi-project. And someone like Balfour Beatty or some of our asset owning clients have opted for the Enterprise Plus license. I mean, interestingly, we do have a couple of clients that spring to mind. FK Group, a building envelope contractor, for instance, that have that Enterprise Plus license because they do have some development capability in-house, and they're leveraging both the APIs and the forms framework within the system in order to more closely map the CDE system into their business process and to underpin things like their IMS and all of their processes and procedures. So largely today, and I think a lot of the requests that we get still are from businesses who want to move from Stone Age to Space Age, from yellow folders, email and Dropbox straight into PAS 1192 workflow. And from a technological perspective, absolutely we've got an environment that can support that. And I guess from an implementation perspective, getting from A to B quickly really highlights the difference in the implementation approaches if we're looking at a single project to a multi-enterprise environment and rollout. And typically in terms of that project rollout, anything from a 2 to 6 week duration. This is a project we do with our clients, not to them. You've all got day jobs to do, so it's important that we give you breathing space in between our consultancy meetings or our training sessions to reflect, gather up your questions, or reflect on the completeness of your policies and procedures before we move forward. And that typical adoption might be start with BC project, identify a Pathfinder project on a SaaS basis, 12, 24, 36 month term, whatever the duration of the project is. Ensure that the technology is accepted by your organization. Identify 1 or 2 key supply chain partners, open up access to them, get used to collaboration, get used to reviewing both your contracts, what your acceptable use policy in terms of sharing of information will be. And when you're confident in that environment, then consider implementing this type of technology right across all of your projects. And for those of you that are then really ambitious and rather than just work to the standards. You want to flex the system. You want to look at how you can integrate perhaps with your ERP and finance, or maybe existing mobile applications. The Enterprise Plus license again can afford you that user experience as well. So just the final things before we go into some questions. We welcome your feedback on today's webinar. Please do request an online demonstration or an on-site workshop. We really are decent folk. We like to come in and listen largely rather than present at you. Every client that we meet has got a unique set of circumstances and culture, and are at different stages of their digital transformation journey, and it's really key for us to understand how we can support your business case for adoption, and ensure that perhaps if you're somebody operational on a project, you know how to clearly articulate the benefits when you're going for business case sign off internally. And then please do keep an eye on our events page. Whilst we had a bit of a stalled start at the beginning of this, for which I apologise, we are putting and looking to put together a monthly schedule of webinars to get people closer to technology and get people closer to some of our client adoption stories, in order that you can see how you can take advantage and move forward as well. So we'll briefly wrap up with some questions. I don't know if we had any questions, Emma?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. We have had some questions. Thank you to those who submitted them. I think we've got time for hopefully 2 or 3. So first question, what would you say are the most important factors that determine the success of CDE adoption on a project?
I think for any business system, rather than just a project CDE, and I think I may have mentioned it in the talk, it's understanding what's in it for the individual in your organisation. So who's going to be exposed to this technology, and do they understand the personal benefits? Have we given them enough clear guidance and communication, and given them the way markers of this is historically or the current ways of working? These are all the benefits of a CDE, because quite often we get feedback from, for instance, businesses that are going through ISO 9001 quality audit, that when the internal audit takes place, it's like the quality police are coming around, and it's an overhead or an additional admin burden on the individual, when really we hope today, through today's webinar, things like simple naming conventions are key. And make sure you bring your business leaders with you. You must have a sponsoring director and somebody who is heavily invested in the ongoing success of your digitization, rather than the adoption of a piece of technology.
Great, thank you. Next question. Can the BC CDE support other naming standards than PAS 1192 and PAS 19650?
So ISO 19650, yes, yeah, absolutely. So again, as Stuart kind of alluded to, whilst we do offer those turnkey license editions, which kind of come pre-configured and templated out of the box to help clients and projects get up and running very quickly, the reality is that when we land into those projects, clients might have a slight variation, or might have some additional metadata tags that we want to add onto that naming convention. So absolutely, from a technology and configuration perspective, there's flex in there to tweak those name conventions depending on the project requirement.
Okay, great, thank you. Final question. What are the main benefits of implementing a CDE across all of your projects?
I think having a trusted source of information that we would feel confident as business users or a project team would be confident in the provenance of that information. So whether that's information that we've received that needs to be reviewed and approved before being made available for instance for site construction, when you're working via email and multiple emails for people on your project directory being exchanged, it's very, very challenging, for instance, to keep a track on latest status, and hence where some of those particular construction we run into particular construction difficulties. So trusted, accessible, secure as well, I would say. A big focus on information security. So think about if you're a business with an IT rep or an external IT outsourced consultancy, who actually is going to take real ownership of your client's question at RFP stage or at contract stage, when you're delivering into a critical national infrastructure client or a client that perhaps builds and operates data centres or similar, because there will be now an expectation that you will meet the security standards, and your systems, policies, procedures and approach will map onto that as well.